Hello, this is Cynthia. Hi, Lori.
Hello, this is Lore. Hello, Cynthia. Cynthia, let's begin by marking the difference between talking about books and about being in the book by getting you to read to us from your new novel.
Okay, I will do that. And just for 2 seconds before I begin, I have to report a kind of sad thing for a new book. Nobody has understood this book. So, what I need to do to begin with is offer you a very, very brief guide for the perplexed and tell you what it's about so you'll know, and then you won't be so mad at me if you venture to read this book. There are two small things. The boy that I'm about to read about is a strange boy, and everything he says is made up, everything. The second thing is that this book is about monotheism, Judeo-Christian monotheism, and it's called The Significant Thing, and the key is on the very last page, and if you make this note, you'll understand everything, and it is Deuteronomy 30, between verses 11 and 14. Okay, here goes. But soon another pupil lay in what had been in the sick boy's bed. This is a school, an Episcopal boarding school. His door was often closed. Either he had come too late to be apprised of the new rule, or he chose to ignore it. Since he was in the form below mine and attended different classes, I glimpsed him only intermittently, in the refectory or in chapel. His behavior in both these circumstances was odd. I never saw him eat a normal dinner. He seemed to live on bread and milk and hard-boiled eggs, and he always sat by himself. In chapel, even when reprimanded, he never removed his cap. In fact, I never saw him without it. And while the rest of us whispered and snickered and pretended to sneeze during the reading of the gospel and all through the sermon, he seemed rigidly attentive. He joined in the singing of a certain few hymns, but for others he was willfully silent. In appearance, he was also uncommon. He was so thin as to approach the skeletal. His legs were nearer to bone than flesh, and this I attributed to his sparseness of diet. His complexion was what I believe is called olive, of the kind known to characterize the Mediterranean and Levantine peoples. But in contrast to this deficit of natural ruddiness, his hair was astoundingly red, and not the red of the Irish, deeper and denser and more otherworldly than any commonplace Celtic red. He had come to us shortly after that influx of Jews, but he hardly seemed one of them, and they too, as we all did, were wary of everything about him, particularly his outlandish names, both the first and the last, which were all it was possible to know of him. There were some playing on his surname, Elephantin, who joked that he was undoubtedly a Jew given the elephantine length of his nose. To these jibes, he said nothing and merely turned away. And others, the more rowdy among us, claimed that only a Jew would flaunt Zion so brazenly. His first name is Ben Zion. Only a Jew would flaunt Zion so brazenly, forgetting that the Psalms recited in chapel, which so frequently invoked Zion, were part and parcel of our Christian worship. I was particularly alert to this error, since on the Wilkinson side, there can be found too many, my father said, evangelical pietists who cling ardently to Zion, a few of whom are bizarrely devoted to speaking in tongues. And in the Petrie line, too, there have been numerous Old Testament appellations. We were once a sober crew of Abrahams and Nathans and Samuels, all of them proper Christians. But there was more than Ben Zion Elephantin's unusual name to irritate conventional expectations. Though rarely heard, his voice was perplexing. It had in it a pale echo of Mr. Canterbury's admirable vowels, but also an alien turn of the consonants, suggesting a combination of foreignisms. Where exactly was he from? And why was he a full semester behind in the form below mine, despite the fact, as I later learned, that at nearly 12, he was 2 years older than I? And was he mad or merely a liar? I came in time to think the latter, though I was, I confess, something of a liar myself, feigning injuries of every variety in order to evade the football field. Mr. Canterbury had been inclined to expose me, and for punishment, doubled my obligations to football and riding. Like my father before me, I was greatly averse to horses. But Reverend Greenhill's view, he is the headmaster, by the way, but Reverend Greenhill's view was that one's duty to God did not necessarily include kicking and galloping, and he sent me off to do as I pleased, as long as it harmed neither man nor beast. What it pleased me to do during those football afternoons when the halls were deserted and the shouting was distant and muffled was to sit on my bed with my chessboard before me while hoping to outwit a phantom opponent. On the memorable day I will now record, my door, according to protocol, was ajar, and when I looked up from my wooden troops, I saw Ben Zion Elephantin standing there. Without speaking a word, he hopped on the bed to face me and began maneuvering first a knight and then a rook and finally a queen. And I heard him say, very quietly, indeed humbly, "If you don't mind, checkmate." I asked him then whether he, like me at that hour, had explicit permission to exempt himself from the field. He seemed to consider this for a moment and said, with unhurried directness, "I have no interest in that." I thought it was natural to inquire, since he was new to the academy, in what other activity he did take interest. "Chapel," he said. I found this unlikely. No boy I knew regarded chapel as anything other than a morning of aching tedium. "Are you religious?" I asked. "The word does not apply," he said, "at least not in the sense you intend." It was a strange way of speaking. No normal boy spoke like a book. I asked where he had been to school before coming to us. "Oh," he said, "many schools, in many places, but I never stay long, and until now, was never taught fractions." "Is that why," I asked, "they put you in fourth?" "Oh," he said, "it hardly matters where I am put. Before long, they will call me away." "Thank you," he said, "for the pleasure of the game." And then he left me and went back to his room and shut the door. Now a little segue. Lori and I were both born in 1928, a month apart, she in Vienna. I on East 89th Street, 3 blocks from the 92nd Street Y. Now, Lori, when we were talking about what we might talk about tonight, and that talk too was audio only, you suggested that we begin by speaking, however briefly, about our age. Why was that important to you?
I didn't think it was important to me. I thought that it might be a good idea to mention up front that certainly I wanted to say that I might very easily, in the middle of a sentence, forget the word that is operative to complete the sentence. And having done that, have done with that problem of being old. That's what I had in mind. But being old does interest me. It's Why does it interest me? I find that I'm much better at being an old person than I was at being a young person. I was a miserable teenager, as I think many people look back on their teenagers as having been difficult. And I find being old, I know how to do it.
I don't know if I know how to do it at all. See, I believe age is irrelevant to a literary conversation. Old age is a fine subject for fiction. I think of Aschenbach in Death in Venice. Reviews, also, this is something I've encountered very recently. Reviews that are, I'm talking about book reviews, I'm talking about reviews of this book, Antiquities, reviews that are dedicated to assessing the condition of a writer's teeth rather than the book itself, are inappropriate, are utterly off the wall. For instance, everybody longs, all writers long to have their books reviewed in the New York Times Book Review. And so that happened. And what I found when I began to read was the following. 30 years from now, the writer is 64. 30 years from now, if I reached your age, I would kiss the floor. Now, that's not a review. That's a review of age. And it's irrelevant. It doesn't belong in a book review. But Lori,
I'm not going to argue about that. That's true.
Okay, but you have a book published recently, brilliant and original book, and it's called, cleverly, The Journal I Did Not Keep. In this book, you have an essay, and it's called something like
How to
Get Old, is that it?
How to Be Old. You reminded me of that, and I had to look it up. I'd forgotten I'd written that. That's how forgetting works.
Well, you said in there something extremely memorable. Everything in this book, The Journal I Did Not Keep, is memorable. You said, it's all so interesting. And you said it twice. So because we always quarrel about everything, I don't find it interesting. I don't want to talk about it. I don't want to think about it. I want to read and write. And if I can do that until, death and disability, I will be perfectly happy.
Cynthia, I think when I say interesting, I mean the same thing. One of the little examples, I had to look up this essay in order to remind myself. One of the things I remember I say in it is having fallen down in front of my building as I was entering, my first thought was, oh, isn't that interesting? And the second part of that thought is, this is something I can write about. So the word interesting means this is something that I now understand, which I hadn't understood the moment before. And this may or may not fit into a story. I want to investigate to understand it and be able to put it into words. So is that so different from what you're saying?
No, it isn't. But you do know that we have disagreed for many, many years, decades. And
Decades, Cynthia, half a century, more than half a century. You and I started quarreling, disputing in 1964.
oh, you remember the date?
I'll tell you why. Because my husband, David Segal, was your editor on Trust, and it was the year in which you wrote a review of my book, Other People's Houses, and the year in which I gave birth to my second child. So, yes, I remember 1964. And I remember those years. I wonder whether I want to check this out with you, that you and David and I would be on the phone for an hour at a time, several times a week, and we would be arguing.
We were always arguing, always. And we have been arguing until this very day, and probably until this very
moment.
Actually, well, I'll tell my David's story.
Yeah.
It's a story about an editor, my editor, and I was invited to your apartment to say hello. And that's when I met you, Lori, but essentially through David. But I had submitted a very long novel called Trust. And this too, by the way, it's not that nobody understood it, but nobody really read it. And I had offered that I would have a gold medal struck for anybody who could prove to me that they had read it from beginning to end. And I've never had that gold medal struck. But this was my first nibble from an editor that I got. And he sent it back with the first 100 pages excised. And I knew it's now or never. I had better accede to this or I won't be published. And so I said no. And David Segal said, okay. And forever since then, I have called him the perfect editor. And Lori, you have an editorial story also about the famous Bob Gottlieb. And can you tell that?
Yeah, Cynthia's stories about editing are all that you hated your editors, or you wished your editors didn't hate them. You wish they would be quiet. But I have also I'm not always so sure as you are that my writing is working when it first hits the page. So I have had good editing as well as irritating editing. The irritating editing is when the editor wants me to sound different, modern, or American, different from my own voice. But that doesn't mean that I can't be improved. And I think what you mean is that Bob Gottlieb saw that towards the end of my book, Her First American, I had sent my hero, my protagonist, my hero, back to the West Coast, and after that, I wasn't very interested. And he said, by the you're not interested in this book anymore after he goes back to the West Coast, so you had better do something and rewrite the last part, which absolutely was essentially the right thing to tell me and the right thing to make me do. Cynthia, is that the story you meant? Is that what you were remembering?
What I'm recalling was that you had submitted a series of short stories, and Bob Gottlieb, whom I very, very much like, forever and forever, he said, you're not writing short stories, you're really writing a novel. And that is the way you write a novel, by thinking they're short stories. Is my memory correct?
Yes, you're correct. Yeah.
Okay. But to return to the beginning of our friendship, it went very well for a while. And then on a bus
in Israel.
in Israel, on our way to Jerusalem, we quarreled so deeply and bitterly that Lore threw me out of her life. She created this breach, and we didn't talk again. Actually,
Wait, let me tell this part because I remember this. We did not talk for some months, and then our friends invited us to dinner together and made us walk into a room and close the door on us. And Cynthia and I got the giggles. We started to laugh.
I didn't remember
That was the end of the breach.
Yeah. Well, we have been discussing what to do when there is a breach of opinion, and a very deep one based so deeply in one's character and history and beliefs. How do you fix it? So, Lore, we have never fixed it.
No, the way I put it is that we've been quarreling and arguing for half a century, and we haven't made a dent.
That's true. That's true. We haven't made a
We have
dent.
absolutely not altered each other's opinions, nor have we stopped, nor do we choose, nor do we wish to stop talking.
And I don't know which 2 months recently, Lore, you and I engaged in an email correspondence very, very feverishly.
About this subject, it's specifically about talking when one disagrees. That was our subject. Right?
And then, yes, and then why do we have to have a breach? I mean, let's look for the figure in the carpet, of this breach. And then we almost simultaneously came up with a way to look at it. And the way to look at it, Lore succinctly, brilliantly, startlingly called and or. And sometimes and, comma, and or. And I called it affinity versus distinction. And Lore, do you want to describe this a little more?
Well, I had a way of thinking about affinity. I have had a recollection, Cynthia, which I don't think I've mentioned this to you. I had a flashback. I remember I must have been 12 or 13 in Guildford, in England, walking from the from the where I lived with my two foster mothers. I was going to school, and I remember walking past the church around the corner and thinking, I know what I want. I want to feel ordinarily the way other people feel and to be able to put it into words. And I remember that thought. And I think that's what I mean by affinity.
Mm.
Now,
go ahead, please, go ahead.
No, you take on distinction.
Yes, it's a question of basic worldview. I don't know, Lore, do you think that worldview adequately renders Weltanschauung?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said. Say that again. I didn't hear that.
I was trying to talk German.
Weltanschauung. Oh, I get it.
Yes. Right.
No,
do you think?
No, of course not.
Well,
it's a little corner of it.
Okay, so my sense of the world is you look at it and you must make distinctions. You have to see that up is not down, right is not wrong, and that there is a kind of hierarchy of distinctions. And Lore's view, in my view, is that she looks for affinity. She looks for harmony. She looks to see how like is like, and I look to see how unlike is unlike. And we found different examples of this.
Can I tell my
Please, yes.
Ginsberg story? Now, somebody give me the name of what's her name? Our Justice Ginsburg. Oh, this is a wonderful little story I got from the radio from WNYC. An erstwhile clerk of Justice Ginsburg remembers that her friend and antagonists, Antonin Scalia, would write his opinions and hand them to Ginsburg early on so that, as she put it, she could deepen and enhance her opinion, which would be the opposite opinion, of course, of Scalia's. I found this really moving and very and wonderfully pregnant. That you want to win your case, but you want to hear the other side fully.
Lori, there's a tiny little tendril of maybe flaw in this beautiful story. And we also know that they were really good friends and they even went to baseball games together. But what's missing in the story is, did Ginsburg reciprocate? Did she hand him her views for him to further contemplate?
One of the things necessary for affinity is to not want the second part of the story. Doesn't have to have a second part of the story. Just I don't need it. You require it. You asked me that before. I don't require that second part. I don't know. I don't need to know what happened.
Okay, so let me give my another example. There are Talmudic sages. Their names were Shammai and Hillel. And by sage, I mean somebody, or it means in context, somebody who interprets, comments on, and interprets biblical passages, very much really like the Supreme Court judges do, checking out the Constitution. Well, Hillel was famous for being very much on the lenient side, and Shammai was rigid and strict. Hillel won, luckily, beautifully, satisfactorily, so that his views entered the mainstream. So he was the affinity guy, but the distinction-making guy, the rigid guy, the guy you wouldn't be comfortable with, he's the rest of the story, but he doesn't disappear out of the history of the story. He still maintains his viewpoint. It's recorded. He isn't thrown out. And then Lori came on. Tell about Andor, okay?
I'm not sure what else to say about it.
Well, you took the same idea of affinity and distinction, and you boiled it down to two words. In other words, you will accept a point of view, but you will also look across and see or, and you will. I mean, we are Hillel and Shammai.
But isn't Cynthia? Now you have to correct me if I'm mistaken. Isn't it so? Isn't it true that Talmud in general, or Talmud, that's the method in which Talmud retains the argument after coming to a decision? Isn't the argument recorded surrounding the original question?
Well, Lori, as we must admit, neither you nor I are Talmud scholars, but we know the tenor of these debates, and both sides are retained, and that's kind of
that's what we're doing.
That's what
you and I are doing.
That's what we discovered, and this Weltanschauung, in my bad pronunciation, is what both divides us because they're different, but the fact of it is binding, because we see it. We see both sides.
And
Harmonize.
And yours and mine and somebody else's and yet another is.
And the thing about this worldview thing and understanding yours and mine is that the issues, the political issues, the philosophical issues constantly change. They're incessantly streaming away and taking different forms. They enter different incarnations. Still.
But Cynthia, didn't you tell me that, is it Shammai, which is the stricter one, the Shammai?
Yes. Yes. What about
there is either something is either true or it is not true. There cannot be. You can't have an untrue truth. And of course, I don't believe that for a moment. I believe that the truth, that there is your truth because you experience it, the world differently from my truth because I experience it differently.
That's what we've come to.
Did we ever agree about that or disagree about that?
Well, this is what we agree on.
We agree on that, right?
And this underlies whatever the present day issue is. So this is how the breach that we have lifelong
connects us.
Connects us, exactly. Perfect word. Only connect. Yeah. If ever there was a Hillel remark, it's for only connect. Well, I want to ask you something about your background, which you've already mentioned. This was a British initiative. I'm just looking for it. The kinder transport, the children's transport to England. Children, in Lore's case, from Vienna. In a cousin of mine's case, from Sudetenland. And they went on this train and they were rescued and given, as Lore mentioned, foster homes, all kinds of different people. And her book is called Other People's Houses. This book, well, let me put it this way. You are that rare living writer whose book has become an undisputed classic. Other People's Houses was bound to live on as a permanent historical document, as many such memoirs do. But with this significant difference, Other People's Houses is a necessary witness to the Holocaust and at the same time a remarkable novel. So here's my question. Not about your history so much in that sense, but here comes a 10-year-old child and a child reader, and you were reading in Vienna, you were reading children's stories, and then you come to England and you acquire the language and you're reading in English children's stories. Were you aware at the time of I'll use the word distinction, of tone or something or other, something perhaps unnameable between a child reading in Vienna and a child reading in England?
No, I don't think so. But I do have language memories. For instance, I remember standing at the door of Mrs. Cohen in the book I call her Mrs. Levin, in the Cohen's house, looking out into the garden, looking down and seeing that thing, that brown thing that things grow in. And I was aware with some desperation that I didn't have the word for it. I knew it in German, but I didn't know it in English. Soil was not within my vocabulary.
Did you get it from context?
No. I mean, I was standing there by myself, asking it, "What's your name?" so that I can think about you in English.
Oh,
this was not a problem of communication except between myself and the object.
Mhm.
The reason I learned English so very quickly is I did come with a little English, and in Vienna, the 10-year-old already had a little English, but there was nobody to talk to except the English people I was living with. So I learned English in 6 weeks.
Hmm.
But I have since been really interested in asking people, the many people I know who moved from speaking one language into speaking another. I mean, we come as German speakers and we end up English speakers. What happened in between? And
Mhm.
we don't remember. We
Mm.
none of us remember.
Mm.
The,
Yeah.
the is that the child, the refugee children, all of them picked up the accent of the street, not the wrong accent of their parents, which I find really an interesting fact.
It is really an astonishing fact, too. And you explored again in your novel. You said the name of it a moment ago. Uh, uh, your character, Ilka, who is sent west,
Her first American.
yeah, her first American, who happens to be a Black intellectual. Um, but
Oh, wait a minute. Oh, okay, yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
no, correct me or give me perspective.
No,
And
wait a moment. Ilka is the Jewish girl. Brunetta is the black girl.
no,
Are,
I'm
are
talking
we
about
are we talking? Are we understanding each other or not?
Carter. Okay, you are in a store, in a bar, in a restaurant or something, and you speak to a total stranger. This is your first American, and not counting New York, which is a
Yeah.
different place. And you are unable to distinguish what is going on around this fellow because he's very charismatic and brilliant, and immediately there's magic about him, and yet they won't serve him or they make fun of him. And Ilka doesn't understand any of this because she doesn't have the language. And she comes as an adult refugee, not as a child refugee. And she's utterly bewildered. Now, this is an amazing concept. I mean, this is like coming from Mars and trying to figure out what the world is.
Very much so. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, do we have anything else we want to talk about having to do with the use of language, or do we
Well,
want?
do we want to talk about the figure in the carpet, which is about all of this, isn't it?
Yeah,
Do we want to quarrel about that because you and I understand it so differently?
that would be a perfect example of not understanding the same.
Do you want to, or shall I give the
You do it.
crux of the story?
Yeah, I'm too long-winded, and you're succinct.
Hold on, I even wrote it out so I would do it as briefly as possible. Oh, that's now finding it. We are in a. Hold on. Let me see if I can find it quickly. Oh, here we are. Um, Across the dinner table in one of Henry James's great country house parties, a clever young literary critic hears the famous writer Hugh Verrick, or Verrica, I forget which, you and I argued about what his name was, whose book he has lauded in print, called Criticism Twaddle. Discovering that he might have hurt the young man's feelings, seeks him out, and in the late night conversation sets our story's plot in motion by declaring that nobody knows the secret of his meaning, though it inheres in every word and every comma. The rest of the story, the Baroque story, which I think is tongue in cheek, makes a tremendous complication about there's only one person who believes himself or knows himself to have figured out the secret and is sworn to not tell it to anybody else except his future wife. And there's a sick ill mother-in-law. There's a posting abroad to make that marriage take a long time in happening, and when it happens, there's a car crash, and the person with the information is promptly killed. Verica is killed, and the question is nobody. There is also the charming notion of a bunch of young intellectuals whose raison d'être is to find out what the literary meaning is. I think that's that's very witty. The question, I believe myself to know what the answer is. Cynthia believes I'm wrong. I believe the answer is exactly what we started this conversation with. The relation to a book is not about it, but the words themselves.
Well, with that, I agree 100,000%.
But you don't believe that is Verica's secret.
Well,
that's not a figure in the carpet, as you understand it.
Yes, I don't know. You may be just turning me around 180 degrees. What you said just now, I hope that we don't want to lose the figure in the carpet, and everybody on earth should read this story.
It's one of the most annoying stories in the world.
Right.
I gave it to my students to read, and I think they hated me for that session thoroughly.
Well, the thing is this, that it's very hard to begin a thought with the thing is this. The figure in the carpet is about something missing that nobody can find. And someone insists that he has got it. He has got it. He knows what it is, but he won't tell until he comes home. And he's been away in some other country, and at home, breathlessly, they wait for him to tell the secret. And then there's a series of unfortunate incidents, and this person who has the secret it has been passed on. That person gets bumped off. The next one who has it gets bumped off, and finally, everybody who has had the secret is out of the picture. So it's left in the air. What is it that this guy is talking about? What is this this astounding secret that motivates this novel? I think it's enough that it's a concept, that it exists as a concept. And in concomitant with this, we have been reading The Beast in the Jungle. This is about a man who believes that some remarkable, extraordinary event will happen in his life. And he has a confidant, a woman. He meets her in youth, and she shares his interest in finding this wonderful thing that he believes is owed to him, will happen to him. And of course, we find out that, the wonderful thing is what he missed. She was right there in front of him, and he was selfishly involved in his idea. And there she was loving him, and he didn't love her back. So it's a missing thing in The Beast in the Jungle. And there's a missing thing, a glorious idea, an insight in the figure in the carpet. So they're alike that way.
My suggestion, my metaphor is that I think that we all know, and I shared that with you earlier, that you're piece of paper, an envelope. You have to have it. You missing it. You look everywhere. You are never going to find it if the envelope is lying there right before you and you don't recognize it. I think that is apt for both of these stories, isn't it? In one case, what you have in front of you is the woman whom you could love if you only figured it out. In the other case, the words are in front of you. The words are right there. You don't recognize them, is my interpretation.
but both stories are, I mean, they take you over, they sweep you away.
Wonderful. Yes. Yes.
And is it because, what is the reason? The terrible, sad, cutting irony of the beast in the jungle, who was supposed to spring on this man. But is it, oh, that's a tragic story. Is it just as tragic to lose a central idea, to lose an insight or an instinct? Well,
Which,
you said it's language. You said it's language. Um, what?
well, but I think I think it's one of the jokes of the figure in the carpet is that all these young people build their lives around this question. I mean, that's very funny. That's very witty.
You also said that you think the writer that they're also puzzled by is the only sane person in the cast of characters, which is also very funny if it's true.
One little
Is he a liar, or is he insane? Is he a liar? Is he telling the truth? I mean, we don't know. But his passion about it, whether it's fabricated or not, is it sweeps him away. So
one of my cues and clues about my interpretation of the figure in the carpet is that at that house party where the famous writer is present, the reviewer is present, the conversation is universal. There is a table on which every literary magazine is laid out for us to read.
and it's in the middle because it comes out in the middle of the week.
There's one thing that's missing in that bit, even in the library. That book is not in the library
Of Lady Jane's mansion.
Yes.
She's the host at this party.
So the one thing you don't have is the thing itself, the book, the words.
And you think the book doesn't exist?
Oh, no, I think the book exists. I think, no, my notion is that the secret is the book, except it's right in front of your nose and you're looking for meaning instead of reading the book.
Well, but this is in our prior discussion, you can hear how we part. But the prior discussion, no, I mean the.
Yeah, you made me insecure with your idea. Go ahead.
Yes, one of the characters, it said, it's there explicitly, sours on the writer, the magical mystery writer, because he reads him over and over again, and his admiration ebbs, and he loses interest entirely. So there was a very close reader among these people, all involved with the Middle magazine. And that's why I think that the book is there, even if it's missing in Lady Jane's library.
I think it's you might remember the old movement against interpretation. I think that's what's going on here. Yes. Don't read it in order to interpret it. Read it to read it. Read it to feel it, to know it.
Okay, so this brings up, leaving aside these two stories, which are really imperative for any person to have in their library. Yes. About novels in general, everybody is devoted to storytelling. There's nobody alive who doesn't love a story. So there are many, many machines nowadays which give you story. And if you want a story, you don't have to go to great literature like these two Jamesian stories. You can stream a series There's a series called Shtisel about ultra-Orthodox Jews in Jerusalem, which is as good as any Dickens novel, but it is a play, it's theater, it's a movie, it's a film, it's a series. What differentiates all these story machines from the oldest, and not the oldest, definitely not, but a very old story machine called a book. And why isn't the story enough? Why do people read shabby novels which give them immediate satisfaction, no mysteries in them, they're predictable and so on, but they're satisfying? So what's the difference? What makes people read literary novels? And isn't the answer the language?
Yeah.
Just you said the language only.
Yes.
I'm
with you.
I wish, Lori, that you could find some passage in, well, I want to say that Other People's Houses is excerpted in the journal I Did Not Keep. But could you find an excerpt which tells about your style?
I think it's almost too late to do that, Cynthia. It would take too much.
Well, then, can we generalize? Because the first time I read Other People's Houses, and I read it, I don't know, half a dozen times, again and again. I can't stop. I can't keep away from it. The first time, I thought it was cold. I thought, this is cold writing. It's boiling hot writing. And the reason is, do you want to say it, or should I say it?
I don't know what you're thinking.
Okay. It's that you never say anything outright. Neither do you show it outright, but it's there. It's there.
I wanted to come to fruition in the mind of the reader. Yes, not in my page.
It's not there, and it's tremendously there. So in a way, it's the figure in the carpet.
Yes.
This book is a figure in the carpet, which kind of rounds out our conversation.
All I can say is thank you.
Bernard Schwartz, have you accumulated some queries?
Hi, Cynthia. Hi, Lori. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Very well.
Thank you for that. I think I speak for the audience members, which you can't see, but who can hear you, that we'd be happy to eavesdrop, another hour or another night on one of these phone calls between the two of you. Let me ask some of the audience questions, and we'll leave it at that for now. Here is one. One audience member asks, could you have had this sort of conversation about arguing with each other 50 years ago? What is it about your friendship today that's different than it was before?
We did. I would like to say that 50 years ago, I still thought I could change Cynthia's mind. I no longer think that, or even choose to wish it.
I couldn't change her mind, and I was mad at her for that.
But you don't try to change my mind now.
Oh, I could not possibly.
That's right.
Dream of doing it's deep in the Weltschauung's DNA, and mine too. No, it's irreconcilable, but we are in a position now of reconciling. I don't know if this is related to age. I don't know. I don't think so. I think it might just be exhaustion.
How about affection?
Or what?
Affection.
Affection, right. Actually, there you are with your affinity. There I am with exhaustion.
Okay.
We are eternally Hillel and Shammai, without any background. So, um,
Cynthia, you said at the outset before you read that people had been getting the book wrong. So a couple of people said, what were they getting wrong, and what should they have gotten right? And then I think maybe to broaden the question for both you and Lori, um, does it matter in terms of critical reception?
sure, it matters. If a book has meaning, it has meaning. And if you're reading it, there are other elements in the book. The narrator's an old guy, he's an antiquity. He lives with other antiquities. That's probably enough of a subject, and it has been enough of a subject. But to make the mistake that the orphan, everything he says is true, I think that's a different kind of mistake. It's not really at the heart of it. I mean, monotheism is the significant thing, but because it is about uh, what shall we say, lever of the world, um, it cannot be named. And so if you write a book about something that cannot be easily named, but its opposite is easily named, these God, the Nile god in his various um, appearances, with a ram's head, with a stork's head. In other words, monotheism, by its very nature, cannot be named, and but its opposite is all around us in objects, and certainly in the history of Egyptian religion. So I'm just pleading with anyone who could possibly be interested to look up Deuteronomy 30, verses 11 to 13. It's there. It's also not named. It's also not named. It just says it's very close to you. You don't have to search for it in the heaven. You don't have to search for it in the sea. And I put in my echo of that, you don't have to search for it in excavating the ground where you're going to find these objects. The verse ends, it's very near you, it's in you.
Cynthia, I think some other people also wanted to hear you talk about the origins of this story. You call it a story, not a novel.
That was the designer's designation. I loved it, yes.
When did you begin working on it? Yeah, that's it.
Okay, the origin was a discovery. I knew nothing about this excavation from circa 500 BCE, before the Common Era, of this Jewish temple on an island along the Nile. It was, as they say nowadays, gobsmacking. It was astonishing. And I began to look into it. First of all, scripture, also in Deuteronomy, or no, it might be Leviticus. Anyway, scripture has a kind of ukase. Stop having these shrines all over the place with your backsliding, into Canaanite practices, and some of you who throw babies into the fire as expiation for sins and that kind of thing. We are the Jerusalem temple. We are to be the center. There shall be no other temples, and yet there not were this one. And there were shrines all over the place, and they're full of cult figures and female fertility goddesses and that type of thing. So you can say, so the origin was the discovery of this history. And right next door to it was a Nile God center called KHUM, Khnum, and this is what destroyed the Jewish temple next door, though the people were intermarrying and living as neighbors. But because the superfluous Jewish temple doubted the Nile God next door, the Nile God people destroyed the Jewish temple. And then it became a bump, and the bump was excavated, and the temple remains there. You can go and see it. That is its remnants, its vestiges, its bones, so to speak.
Where did the character of Lloyd Petrie sitting down at the temple and on assignment to write his memoir intersect with that discovery?
Made up.
Petrie, Lloyd Wilkinson Petrie, is writing his memoirs. He doesn't know a damn thing about the temple. But the boy, who is a hallucinator and has investigated all this because he's read everything. He's besotted. He's delusionary. But he has invented even how the temple came into being. And what the archaeologists and scholars have said is the temple came into being because at that time Persia was running Egypt, and they wanted some people who didn't like the Persians come and be sentries. And so what is defined now as who this Jewish population was, that they were mercenaries sitting there protecting Egypt from Persian invasion from the south. It bothered me that Jews should be mercenaries because I'm a diaspora person, and I kind of like the unwarlike and completely indefensible defenselessness. I won't go into this. Okay, I'm leading into extraneous stuff, but I changed the history. And some of the people who were reading this thought that these Israelites who founded this temple were polytheists, and that was a very big mistake. So it's hard to, I'm entirely responsible for obfuscation. But the problem is that it's quite clear to me, and all the clues are there, all of them. So there we are. I am culpable.
Here's a question for you both. If you could name one thing that you admire or even envy about the other's writing, what would it be?
Oh, her sentences. Cynthia's sentences. They're fantastic.
Okay.
And I want to say one other thing. The moxie with which she uses ideas. My favorite thing from Puttermesser is that Puttermesser, the New York lawyer Puttermesser, creates a golem out of the stuff, out of the soil in one of her plantas.
Well, my answer is exactly the same. Lore's language, and I referred to it early. The fact that everything is in between the words, and the words are chosen. Oh, Lori, this was something I meant to ask if I could do that and interfering with the Q&A for a bit.
Please do.
Okay. Lori, you know the idea of the putter inner and the taker outer, that the Faulkner puts in as much of the language as he can, and Henry.
I can't. I'm sorry, I can't hear you. Suddenly, the sound is not very good. Could you say that again?
Maybe it's the words I was using. Putter inner and taker outer. Faulkner puts in all the words he can find, and Hemingway takes away. It's a somebody who adds and somebody who subtracts, and that's what I admire about your exactly the same thing. Language. You take out what's excessive, but the words that you choose are perfection. And I know that you have said, and I hope you'll tell us in your own voice this, how you can be walking along 20 years after you've written a word and you find a better one.
Yeah.
Tell about that.
Well, in I think in her first American, I describe a woman in some office as having a useless bosom. Now, this was written in 1986. It was within the last 5 years that I found myself walking up 100th Street towards my house, my apartment, and I suddenly thought, not useless, unused bosom. Now, why I had not been thinking about this woman for sure. I had not been thinking about the book. I had not been thinking about anything. Somehow, I must assume that dissatisfaction with that word must have been working in the back of my head somewhere. I must say it was a surprise.
That's marvelous. That's a marvelous thing. Yeah. So let's see. Oh, here's something I was thinking while I was rereading a good part of my first American, this novel. I think the title is very, very exquisitely smart. Ilka, who doesn't know English and makes a mistake. You have, what was the date of publication of that? Oh, I was about to say that it appears in an excerpt from it appears in the journal I did not keep. What was the date of its publication?
1986.
1986. And you have this African-American character in 1986. I don't know if we were still saying African-American.
Yeah, in the book, I call him a Negro, which is definitely out. That's no longer a proper.
But that's what was the language.
Yeah, in those days, that was the right word.
Respectable language of the time.
It's written in 86. It's published in 86, but the events happen in the 50s, in the 1950s.
Even more so, right. So this is a kind of, I don't know, it's a speculative question, as all questions are, or is it a pointed one? Because we are in a different stage of considering minorities in this country now. And there's a lot of non-compromise and a lot of divisiveness and so on. How would you or anybody read the character of Carter now? And I mean, what I'm struggling here. Today's sense of Black consciousness with Carter's. Do you think Carter would be an Uncle Tom these days because he has a bunch of friends with all kinds of, they live together communally in a summer place, and it's the most delightful thing. And they all have grievances. The Black people there have grievances, and some have been involved with the CP, and Ilka says, "What CP?" And I say to myself, "What CP?" And it's Communist Party. And there's a Jew in there, and there's intermarriages between white and black in there, and all of that. And a child that everybody loves and is also a kind of nuisance, and is adorable. So what does this commune, is this commune possible today? I mean, what do you...
No. My answer is
asked.
It was written at that time, about an even earlier time. It is about an affair between a Jewish girl and a black man, and it does not include any difficulties because they're in New York. There's no, they don't have any particular difficulty. And the Jewish girl's grandmother says, "So why don't you marry him?" So I don't think that was usual in those days either.
That was unusual. Why don't you marry him? And the fact that
he was an elegant and gentlemanlike man, and she liked him.
And they were lovers, real lovers, physical lovers.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well,
that was not rare, I don't think.
You say that again?
I mean, I don't think that's a rarity then or now or then. I'm not sure. I'm sure. I think it's a different book. I think what you're asking me, the answer is it is a different book now from the time it was written.
Thank you. That's exactly it. Would it be read differently now? Oh, that's it. You got it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you answer that?
I'm not sure. I don't understand the question.
You posed it.
No, I'm just making it. I'm just stating it as my understanding that it is a different book now. But that's, you yourself said history moves. That was one of your statements earlier.
But that's really the point, that it's a different book now because it's read. This whole issue is read differently now. Is that what you mean? That's what I thought you meant.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
And for better and for worse.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'll interject and just say we'll have one more audience question, which is what, other than calling each other up and arguing over the phone, what are you working on now in your writing?
Well, Lori?
I seem to be writing small mini essays that depend on some of the things I find interesting.
And they're wonderful. And they're being published in the New Yorker and online with the New Yorker. And also they are all there up to now, except the ones you're writing now, in the journal I did not keep.
And what are you writing, Cynthia?
At the moment, nothing. Nothing.
Comfortably nothing, Cynthia. Are you comfortable writing nothing?
Oh, no, I can't stand it.
That's right.
And I've been mulling, and I have a lot of tendrils and stuff, but they're not all satisfying because I need to begin with an idea, and then comes this psychological aspect, then comes the character, and I have an idea, but I dare not touch it. So I have to figure it out.
Write it.
Yeah. So we've spilled our beans.
Well, on behalf of everyone else, thank you both. And we'll, I hope continue the conversation. Thank you for everybody who tuned in, and thank you again, Cynthia and Lori. It was a real treat.
Thank you, Bernard.
And thank you. Thank you.
Thanks for listening. For more information on the 92nd Street Y, New York, and all of our programs, please visit us at 92ny.org.